How's that? Anyone want to start?
Yes, I want to start. I heard some opinions of people that we are living a kind of warm cyber war. It's not a hot war, it's not a cold war. It's just in the middle, no? It's something
War?
With a little warm, yes. Some kind of attack, some kind of espionage. It's not a very easy situation to work with it. So, what is your opinion about who will be the role of the states in this kind of situation, and how they can deal with that situation when you have attacks, but it's not clear that it's the government of that country that is supporting the attack. What do you think? What do you think about that?
So I always get asked this question, and it's a fair question, but on the one hand, but on the other, it's an unfair question because I'm not a politician, and I'm not a head of state. I have a hard enough time being the head of a company, but I can at least offer my opinion. This is probably one of the most complex issues ever facing mankind, because information technology and its latest incarnation, the emergence of big data, truly has the capability to make all of our lives so much more enriched and better, for all the reasons I described in my keynote. But it also has the potential to sow the seeds of our very destruction. What I didn't say in my keynote yesterday was that the current version of IP, there are 4.3 billion binary addresses. Think about that for a second. There's 2.4 billion internet users. I said there'd be about 1 billion devices connected to the internet. We're almost out of addresses. When we go to IPv version 6, we will have 340 trillion addresses. That's a lot of addresses. So when I said yesterday was our attack surface was going to expand, if you go back to even 5 or 6 years ago, our attack surface was this big. 5 or 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, we still had very few web applications. The iPhone was just starting to make its appearance. There was no iPad. We didn't have all of these mobility devices. We didn't have Facebook in a big, meaningful way. So all of these changes in the last 5 years have expanded our attack surface like this, right? And with IPv6, and as we connect more and more objects to the Internet of Things, the attack surface is going to go from like this to the bottom of Argentina to the other side of India. That's how big the attack surface is going to become. And if things are connected digitally, you can trigger those things to do things. All the automobiles take a left turn all at once. All of the devices inside to regulate our hearts or record data fail at once, right? All of these things could create destructive events. So as wonderful as it could be on the one hand, it could be a disaster on the other. Now, back to the geopolitical answer. We actually have a model that already exists, and it's about nuclear non-proliferation, right? So far, at least, mankind has been able to avoid a nuclear war. We were able to avoid a nuclear war because everyone could see the insanity of launching one. We have to reach a level of understanding between and among governments that we can never let cyber weapons develop and proliferate. So again, I'm not a politician, but this is my view, and I think it's the only common sense view. We also have to make sure we also have to make sure that the internet is trustworthy and confident. We can do that two ways. We can get governments to agree not only to not destroy one another and mankind, but to live by the rule of law. And that's the point I was trying to make in my keynote yesterday. We live in an interdependent world, a world of globalization based on world trade. The competitive nature of that will make us productive. Right now, there's all kinds of unevenness in terms of living standards and productivity. But globalization and technology, right, is going to level the playing field worldwide. And it'll be up to however individuals and countries work will be how their livelihoods and standard of livings will become dependent. If and only if we follow rule of law. So governments have to work on that as well. The additional complication that we have on the internet that I don't believe we have in terms of the nuclear problem is the internet is much more difficult to trace than a physical weapon, much easier to launch attacks. So the additional complication is around non-state actors, hacktivists, and terrorists. They too can be stopped, but only if the nations of the world cooperate in terms of tracking them down. By the way, if the nations of the world would cooperate, the same would be true of the criminals. Now, we're not going to eliminate crime in the virtual world any more than we have in the physical world, but we can get it to a level of manageability. And then vendors like RSA that sell security products will be fighting a fair fight as opposed to an unfair fight that exists today. Does that make sense? Yep.
What is the current trend of technology and security, in information security?
So, again, this is taking off a little bit from my keynote. In the last 5 or 6 years, because the attack surface has gone from here to here, if you combine that with the sophistication of the nation-state attackers and the criminals and the hacktivists, there's been a gap between the attack surface and the threat environment and the technology available to defend. We were doing okay defending this. It has become very difficult to defend this. That's why I said yesterday that we need a new model for security. This you could defend like a perimeter. This you cannot. So my model of intelligence-driven security that I spoke about a year ago at this conference is now starting to come to fruition. It is no longer a statement or a dream. It is now becoming conventional, what we call conventional wisdom. People are saying, yes, of course, that's the only way we're going to be able to protect ourselves. What is intelligence-driven security again? Again, it's understanding risk, not only the assets you need to protect, but who you need to protect them from the outside in. But it also means the tools that you use to protect yourselves need to change. They need to change from tools that are preventative, because when you're like this, you can prevent things from getting in, to tools that can detect that you're being attacked and give you the ability to respond to the attack. When you think about the amount of data that traverses IT infrastructure, it's pretty hard to detect and respond to things without having the ability to see all of that data, but not only see it, but to be able to analyze it and correlate it so that you can find the hidden pattern, the unexpected correlation, right? And in so doing, spot the attack and be in a position to respond to that. And we need to do that with a system of controls, and we need to do that with a management platform that's based on big data analytics. But it also requires two other elements. It requires a strong skill set of people that can operate the system. And it also requires information sharing, right? We need as much data as possible, not just internally, but externally, so that we can even anticipate attacks. So that's where security needs to head from a technology standpoint, as well as qualitatively about how companies and organizations look at security and how they get the talent to be able to operate the system. Yes.
I don't resist the temptation to make an unfair question about politicians. In my vision, in general, I can speak as a Brazilian because I know very well Brazilian politicians. Normally, 95% of them are totally ignorant in some strategic aspect of technology, but specifically in this area of cybersecurity. What can I do to convince this politician? How can we help them open their minds to understand the importance, strategically, seriously, the duty that they have to do, and the investments of investment in technology, in intelligence and technology.
Well, that's why I think it is so important to have a session like this, because I understand the problem. You have the ability to spread the knowledge, right? So, in my speech yesterday, I talk about awareness, and I mentioned Cyber Pearl Harbor. I hate that term. because when I think of Cyber Pearl Harbor, I think of Mitsubishi aircraft bombing ships in Hawaii. That cannot be done from the internet today. So I don't know what to do when I hear the term Cyber Pearl Harbor. But I know what to do if somebody tells me that I can flood network traffic with so many requests that I can bring down the biggest banks in New York City. And a politician can understand the difference between Cyber Pearl Harbor and flooding the internet with traffic that would bring the bank, the biggest bank of Sao Paulo, down, right?
They are happening. We have many
And
cases. in Brazil.
we have started to see these kinds of disruptive attacks from what we believe to be a nation state that sponsors terror, right? So if you start to explain the difference between Cyber Pearl Harbor, that I don't know what to do, explain the difference between that and DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service attacks, and you don't even have to use the letters DDoS, you just say these flooding the internet with requests that bring down and make a system crash. What if the flooding of the internet was not directed at financial systems, but was directed at the power grid and caused all the lights in Mexico City, Buenos Aires, or Santiago, right, to go, phew. You know, politicians can understand that. And then it's a question of not only helping them understand what could happen, but understand what needs to be done to prevent it from happening and beginning that dialogue. I don't know the politicians in Brazil. I can tell you I'm having a hard enough time with the politicians in the United States, so I'm not going to take on Brazil yet. But that is why the role of the press is so important. And you guys all tend to cover technology, but I was on CNBC, the cable news station, on Monday. I was supposed to be on for 10 minutes, and they had a whole set of questions. I said, oh, this is great. I'm going to be able to reach a large audience, and I'm going to be able to help build awareness for this topic. The stock market went down 230 points, and I got 1 minute. 1 minute is not enough time. So I said to the journalist, I would like to get an hour with you to explain the situation. He said, oh, I couldn't get you an hour on camera. I said, no, I don't need an hour on camera. I need an hour with just you to help explain to you the whole problem, and then give me 5 or 10 minutes on camera. And he said, well, yeah, I could give you 5 or 10 minutes on camera, but I want to know somebody that was attacked, and I want to know who attacked them. Okay, I agree, that's news, and that's newsworthy. But again, what do I necessarily do with that? I humiliate somebody that got attacked, and I point the finger at some country that we already know is attacking us anyway. How do I improve the situation? You improve the situation by being more thoughtful about the problem and communicating the problem. And again, this is a problem we jointly face. He was saying to me, in the age of Twitter, the news cycles are down not from a day, not from several hours, but literally to minutes. If I don't tweet something faster than the next guy, I've missed it. So I understand and I feel your pain, but clearly we've got to be able to be, we have to have an attention span longer than, how many characters, 140 whatever characters in a tweet. I mean, we have to have an attention span longer than that, don't we? And that's all I'm asking.
I was thinking that in your speech, keynote, you say that big data is becoming a concern in terms of security and protection of information, of course.
Yeah, it'll become the crown jewels, right?
Sure, as you say. But EMC is one of the leaders in offering solutions and services around and into big data. Is it's not a contradiction from RSA and EMC, or how is the balance of this equation?
No, not at all. I mean, we are, I mean, just because I want to point out the risks of big data does not mean that I don't want to embrace it. So I'm very proud of my parent company for enabling big data technology. So that's not a contradiction. If anything, you should give us credit for not only enabling the technology, but having a company that can protect it as well, and then use the same very technology, big data, to protect itself. So I appreciate the question, but no, I don't see it. I don't see a
You have a
contradiction.
book. I received a book, The Human Face of
Big data, yeah,
produced by EMC, and so
yeah,
I think there are a collection of good articles
stories, yeah.
that show in many aspects of human life the role of big data, with the dangers, with the problems,
Yeah.
but some proposals how to manage it and how to deal with all the risks.
Yeah, so there's, I mean, there's all kinds of, there's not just security issues, there's privacy issues, right? I mean, there's a whole host of issues. You know, I believe firmly in technology, and the reason I do is because technology to me is synonymous with innovation and enhancements to productivity. And in the whole course of the history of mankind, the march of human progress has always been about expanding our brains and our knowledge to improve the lives that we live, as well as our children and our grandchildren. So technology is the way to enhance productivity. Productivity enhancement equals elevation of standard of living. And I probably had this very conversation with you in the past. But changes to standards of living have consequences. Use of technology has consequences. We generate pollution. We harm the environment. So it's only in the last probably 50 years that mankind has learned that there's no free lunch with technology. There comes responsibility. So we need to harness technology so that we don't pollute our environments. But I don't think anyone would be calling for us to go to the pastoral lives that our ancestors lived hundreds and hundreds of years ago, without electricity, without running water, without medicine. But clearly, we have to advance as societies, as civilized societies, to come to grips with the consequences of technology. And I will say we haven't done as good a job as we need to. But again, I have hope that technology can help us solve those kinds of problems as well. I mean, one of the big data applications that I'm quite excited about is in smart metering. We might not be close to having smart homes that can tell you that the vegetables in your refrigerator are about to go bad. But we are getting close to having smart buildings. As a matter of fact, I should open the, well, I'll open it at the end. There is an environmental building that well, I'll open it now. Excuse me, let me just open this.